And so I think once the dollar starts to fall, it's going to turn into a free fall. That is the crisis that's coming. It's not going to be a financial crisis. It's going to be something so much worse than that. It's going to be a US dollar crisis, which means it's also going to be a sovereign debt crisis.
So you're not expecting markets to move drastically in either direction following, let's say, a Biden victory. Jerome Powell has basically indicated he's run out of ammo. What happens next?
Well, look, if anything, I think the market will sell off. I think it might be the opposite of what happened when Trump won. Remember, when Trump won, initially the markets tanked in the first few hours that the S&P was trading after hours. But then by the morning, we had completely reversed and we had a big rally. And that's because everybody was convinced a Trump victory, if it happened, would be terrible for the markets. Now, I never bought into that. It didn't make any sense to me because Trump was promising lower taxes and less regulation. None of that is bad for the market. So I think investors figured that out early on, that the Trump win was actually good. Now you have the situation where people think a Biden victory is good for the market because it's going to deliver more stimulus. I think that's wrong. So maybe if Biden wins, we get an initial rise in the market, potentially, but then an immediate decline, or maybe the market will just sell off right away, because in my opinion, there is nothing bullish about a Biden victory. I don't think the money printing and the deficit spending is going to be enough to compensate for the weaker earnings in a, or lower earnings in a weaker economy. And I think the market is already so overvalued, right, from past stimulus, that I don't think the future stimulus, even if it's bigger, is going to have anywhere near that impact. So I think we could get a big drop in the market. Eventually, we may get another rally because there's so much inflation that the price of everything really starts to go up. And so that would include stock prices as well. But I expect the cost of living to far outpace the gains in the stock market.
What's going to happen to the dollar then, Peter? Because if, let's say, the Democrats win, you get more stimulus, even more than now. Shouldn't that be driving up the dollar?
No, the stimulus is bad for the dollar. By definition, the stimulus increases the supply of dollars. So if there's more dollars, they have less value. Plus, the stimulus also rewards people for not working. It keeps people unemployed and unproductive. That's really what it's designed to do. The stimulus actually prevents a real recovery from happening. We get a phony recovery instead of a real recovery, and that's bad for the dollar. Because what happens is, instead of producing more goods and services, we just print more money. And now the Americans take that new money and they go abroad to spend it. And so we're dramatically increasing the global supply of dollars. And so I think once the dollar starts to fall, it's going to turn into a free fall. That is the crisis that's coming. It's not going to be a financial crisis. It's going to be something so much worse than that. It's going to be a US dollar crisis, which means it's also going to be a sovereign debt crisis. US Treasury bonds are going to be right in the crosshairs. And of course, if Treasury bonds are collapsing, so are all bonds, right? All US dollar denominated bonds. And we're a country that runs on debt. Everybody is borrowing. And if nobody wants to lend us money anymore, if the Fed is not the lender of last resort, but the lender of only resort, then this whole house of cards economy is going to come collapsing down all around Joe Biden.
You and I have talked several times, and you've brought up this concept of the collapse of the dollar coming up in the economy. But the reality is, Peter, right now, the dollar is still the de facto currency of the world. Do you see another currency in the future replacing its status?
No, I don't see any currency replacing the dollar. I see gold replacing the dollar. I mean, the dollar replaced gold. So now gold's going to replace the dollar. And the only reason that the dollar replaced gold was because we claimed it was as good as gold, because not only did we back the dollar by gold, but we were willing to give people who had dollars gold on demand. You could freely exchange your paper dollars for a fixed quantity of gold. So that doesn't exist anymore, nor does the US enjoy the same financial position that it had when the dollar was accepted as the reserve currency. Back then, America had the world's biggest trade surplus. Now we have the world's biggest trade deficit. Back then, America was the world's largest creditor nation. Now, America is not only the world's largest debtor nation, but we have more debt than all the other debtor nations of the world combined. So America is a shadow of what it used to be. There is no way that America today would ever have been awarded reserve currency status. The only reason we still have it is because the world has been reluctant to change, because they've been worried about the short-term implications of that. But in the meantime, because the world has allowed us to abuse this privilege, we have run up debts far greater than what we ever could have run up had the world imposed some discipline sooner. But now, I mean, they're not going to wait forever. I think this COVID situation and what we're doing now is a real wake-up call that the dollar's days as the reserve currency are over. But the world is not going to anoint another fiat currency to replace the dethroned dollar, right? They're not going to say, hey, let's make the euro the reserve currency, or the yen, or the Chinese RMB. The world's just going to go back to gold. Central banks already hold gold, right? It's there. So all they have to do is increase their ownership of gold to replace the lost value of the dollar. And a lot of the transition is going to take place in the market. When the price of gold moves up, right now it's around 1,900. When it goes up to 10,000, 15,000, 20,000, that means by default, the reserves that central banks have, now their percentage of gold reserves is going to increase, because the gold that they hold is going to be a lot more valuable relative to the other currencies that they have in reserve. The problem is going to be a lot of these Asian central banks that barely have any gold. They really need to start buying gold now as much as they can in anticipation of this transition back to a real monetary system based on real money, gold, to replace the phony system that we have now that has given us these bubble economies and all these imbalances, and that really has been responsible for all the major financial problems that we've experienced.
Sure, that's more long-term, but in the immediate term, how do you think prices of gold are going to react to a Biden victory? As you remember, in 2016, we had a month of dollar strength and gold weakness following Trump's win in 2016. All throughout November, gold sold off. What do you think is going to happen this time?
Yeah, well, gold's done extremely well under President Trump. In fact, gold's done better under Trump than it did under Obama. But I think gold could shine even brighter under Biden. I think that initial reaction when Trump was elected, gold sold off because people thought, hey, Trump's going to reduce our trade deficit. It's going to strengthen the dollar. We're going to have a bit better economy. He's going to pay down the national debt. None of that happened. All of the good news that was weighing down gold turned out to have been a false rumor. But now, nobody is going to believe that any of that's going to happen under Biden. Biden is clear. He wants bigger government. He wants larger deficits. He wants to increase taxes on the productive people in the economy and increase subsidies on the unproductive. So the economy is going to be far weaker under Biden. Everybody can see that. The deficits are going to be much bigger. The Fed's going to be printing a lot more money. That is very bullish for gold.